So it's wonderful to be here. It's almost always a homecoming for me when I come back here. I retired in 2015. And every time I'm here, I'm energized by all the people and all the ideas and all the excitement and things. And it's really nice to actually get to transfer some of that excitement over to you. And the reason I said yes to this is because the first thing that ever happens when I went into my boss, Larry Page, if you have some idea, the first thing that he always asks you is the problem important? Because if you have a problem and a great idea for something that's not important, he doesn't care. And I feel like education is one of the few things that is important, that everybody can agree is important. And I'm thrilled to get a chance to talk to the people that are on the forefront of education. Now, the big problem when I talk to Larry about something like, some new problem area is this question of, is the solution innovative? And it's a tough question, really, because there's a lot of different kinds of innovation. There's incremental innovation. You make a small change, you get better slowly over time. And then there's disruptive innovation, where you throw all the things up in the air and you see what happens. And almost all innovation in the world right now is incremental innovation. Matter of fact, my job at Google was to try to take and move engineers who are, I think, almost genetically predisposed to do incremental innovation and try to stretch them into doing things that are more disruptive. So why is it that these super smart people are mostly incremental? And the reason they're super smart, they have a lot of things going for them. But the reason is that incremental innovation is predictable. It's really easy to see that if I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, that I'll get to a known outcome. And predictability is kind of fundamental to us, as engineers. The second thing is the way we prioritize. So every year I ask people at the beginning of the year, what are the 10 things that you want to do? And I say prioritize them from the top to the bottom. Things that are most important to things that are least important. And I get that list. And if we have a really successful year, 5 or 6 of those items are going to be crossed off, right? And so when I start the next year, I'm starting with item 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which were the least important things from the previous year. And now I'm adding things that are even less important than that. And so over time, you start getting more and more incremental. And it's a natural thing to do. The other problem is that you really, after a while, believe that the system is too complex to make any changes to. Well, sure, I could change it, but I need these 17 other people to change at the same time, and I just don't have the energy for that, honestly. It's just going to take too much time to do that. Or the other thing that happens sometimes is what I call the suggestion box. If you've ever seen a suggestion box over on the wall, if you have an idea, what you do is you write it on a piece of paper, and you walk it over, and you put it in a box. And it's somebody else's idea to take that and actually do something with it. And that style, that mentality, that innovation is somebody else's job, I think is one of the things that keeps us from actually, realizing what I think is the full potential of everybody. And of course, the reason you're all here is because every idea has to have a champion. It has to have somebody that's providing resources, providing the air cover, that cares, that will isolate a group and let them do something that's very different, and with the full knowledge that it could be a complete dead end. And that's a hard job. It was a hard job for me when I was at Google, and it's a hard job for you sitting in the room. So rather than do this based on abstract, I want to talk to you about a particular journey that I went on in disruptive innovation. And that is a stratospheric attempt. And the stratosphere is a really interesting place. I mean, I can show you a picture of it here. That's what it looks like. It's gorgeous. This was taken from the International Space Station, but the stratosphere is, above the Earth. It goes from about maybe 50,000 feet up to 150,000 feet. It's one of the most beautiful places. It's got all kinds of scientific interest. That's where the ozone layer is and things like that. But it's beautiful and it's interesting. But the truth is, almost no one has ever spent any time in the stratosphere. There's some astronauts that have zipped through it in, like a few seconds or come back in a big fireball. But the number of people in the world that have been over 100,000 feet is extremely limited in this area called the stratosphere. And why is that? Well, here are 3 people that have been above 100,000 feet. And I actually think, other than in rockets or occasionally planes don't go to this height, by the way, just to let you know. Your normal, typical commercial airliner will go to about maybe 40,000 feet. If you happen to be in a U-2, you might get up to 80,000 feet, or maybe 85,000. If you're in an SR-71, you can go to maybe 87,000 feet. That is classified. I have no idea the real number. And if you're in an airplane in this ballistic thing where you go as fast as you possibly can and let the plane kind of tumble back to Earth, you can go above 100,000 feet. But there's only really 3 people that have been above 100,000 feet, now 4, including me. And they have all done it the same way. They've all done it using a balloon, because airplanes don't go that high. And they've all done it using a capsule, some form of capsule or gondola. You know, this one right here is the original. This is Joe Kittinger, my friend. And here's a capsule that they put together for this attempt back in 1960. He went to 102,000 feet. This is Nick Piantonata, and he has a capsule. He actually made it to 122,000 feet, but couldn't disconnect from that capsule, and ended up riding the gondola all the way back to the ground, and in a later attempt, he was killed. And this, of course, is the Red Bull attempt. This is Felix Baumgartner, and he went up to 128,000 feet. But every attempt had used a gondola. And the question is that the right way to think about it? So one way to think about this problem is a gondola is kind of, let me use the analogy of scuba diving. Scuba diving is a beautiful thing because everything you need is with you. You know, you have a wetsuit that protects you from the environment. You've got oxygen, which allows you to breathe underneath the water and things like that. It's the ultimate in freedom. And a capsule is not like that. A capsule is more like a submarine, you know, and the attempts to get up in the stratosphere are more like you go down in the submarine and then you open a hatch and you have a few minutes to reach the surface. But it doesn't allow you to linger. It closes you in. And the oceans would never have been explored to the extent they are right now without a way to actually envelop yourself in the environment. And so that was our inspiration. So the question is, can you build scuba diving for the stratosphere? And the answer is yes, you can. This is what it looks like. So first you need a spacesuit. This happens to be mine. It was done by ILC Dover. They did all the suits that were done by NASA for all the extra vehicle activity. All the Apollo suits were done by them. They had never sold one to a private entity before, so that was obviously a problem. You need a couple parachutes because redundancy is important. So you need a main parachute and a reserve parachute. You need oxygen, which also has to be redundant. That's in these pieces right here. And you need to be able to survive in that environment. But once you have that, you have everything you need to survive in the stratosphere. I could go up in a balloon. I could skydive in this. I could go up in an airplane to that. If we go that high, I can hang glide from 100,000 feet using this kind of approach. So there's a lot of interesting ways I could do. So now I've built scuba diving basically for the stratosphere. But it didn't come easy because it was a radically different approach to solving this problem than what had been done before. So let me take you through some of the problems. So the first problem that people have had to solve is this whole problem of oxygen, okay, and moisture, those two things. And the typical way that you solve the oxygen problem is that you do something called washout, because when you breathe in, you're taking in oxygen. When you breathe out, you've got carbon dioxide, okay? Carbon dioxide at even low amounts is actually toxic to you, even like 15, 17%. So you have to get rid of carbon dioxide. And the typical way you do it is you just use up a lot of oxygen. You blow tons of oxygen by you, and you blow so much by you that the carbon dioxide washes out. And then the other problem you have is when you breathe out, you've got moisture. And moisture, if you're not careful, will fog up the faceplate, and now you can't see, which, by the way, is a very bad thing when you're skydiving through the stratosphere. Sight is a really important thing. So these two approaches, the moisture problem has always been solved by a heated faceplate. That's how people do it. But heated faceplates can actually melt the plastic. They're really, really, and they don't always work that well. I mean, you've seen this when you use a defroster on your car, right? If that defroster doesn't work, you can't see a thing. And so, but what we did was we looked at this in a totally different way. We said, how about if we use an oxygen mask? And the oxygen mask didn't actually supply any oxygen to us at all, okay? The oxygen was already in the bubble that was around me. But what it did was when I breathed out, it took the CO2 and the moisture and routed it to the bottom half of the suit. And if you see this thing around my neck, that's called a neck dam. It's like the worst tie you've ever had. It squeezes you, and what you do then is all the carbon dioxide and the moisture goes in the lower half of the suit. So in the upper half of the suit, I mean, in that bubble is nothing but oxygen. So we solved two impossibly difficult problems, and the reason we did that is because we didn't have enough oxygen in those bottles to last for 4 hours if I used the traditional washout. So by looking at the problem a different way, we came up with a solution which is way better than I think anybody had come up with before. So the second problem is temperature. It gets cold in the upper atmosphere. It gets about minus 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that would be in centigrade, but super cold. And so the question is, how do you test a suit to find out how it is going to behave in those super cold temperatures? Okay? So the traditional way is to go to the Air Force. They actually have this thing called a thermal vacuum chamber, and you can actually control both of those two variables at the same time. But we didn't have access to one of those because it's a private effort. So what we ended up doing was having we actually bought this giant refrigerator. It's a walk-in freezer, that's all it is. We put it on this piece of concrete, and we attached it to this thing right here, which is liquid nitrogen. Okay, so if you put your liquid nitrogen and you pour it into a room, and you have a little handle that you can basically, you know, more or less liquid nitrogen, you can simulate any cold temperature you want, and that's what we did. So this is our thermal chamber. That's me in there, and then we had a couple big fans that rotated things around, and we could actually test and make sure that I was warm enough at what would be 120,000 feet. Now this actually shows one of the limitations, because if you're actually in the atmosphere, we didn't need anywhere near the cooling that we needed in this. Matter of fact, this is the most grueling test. We did it 5 times. And the reason you don't need it is because as you go higher and higher, the molecules are really cold, so they're barely moving, but there's so few of them that they don't actually conduct any energy to you. So we actually massively over-designed the system. But it allowed us to test a very, very worst case scenario quite easily, actually. So the next big problem was spins. I don't know whether anybody saw the Red Bull attempt, you know, Felix Baumgarten. And so this is a video that the Red Bull people are kindly letting me use. And this is Felix going off. And, you know, he actually started off pretty well. He started a turn in one direction, but he's a great skydiver, and he managed to turn that around. But then he got into a spin in the opposite direction. And then the other thing that you'll notice, it's kind of hard to see, but he actually flipped over upside down. So he's in a inverted flat spin at over Mach 1 like this, and he's going to have to get out of that. And because he's one of the best skydivers in the world, he pulls that off. Okay? Probably one of the best skydiving aeronautic feats ever, to get himself out of an inverted flat spin at over Mach 1. But, I mean, I'm a skydiver, but not as good as he is. But the other problem is, I have a wife and 2 kids, right? I can't really depend on the miraculous recoveries. I've told my team they've got to get an unconscious skydiver down to the ground safely, not the best skydiver in the world down to the ground safely. So we have a difference in the way we looked at this problem. So what we did was we were trying to figure out how to solve spins and things like that. And this is before we had solved the spin problem. This is our first test out of an airplane. And I'm going to include this video in here because this is a case where essentially everything went wrong, okay? And I'll go through a few of the things that went wrong, because the reason I want to put this section in is because innovation has failures every time. And it's not whether you have failures that determine whether you're successful or not. It's how you react to failures. And so and by the way, I don't normally show this. You are the only ones that are seeing this. So this is the exit, the very first exit. It's the first time I've been in the spacesuit outside of having suit technicians right next to me. We're about to leave. The very first thing that happened is I knocked off both my GPS antenna and my comm antenna. Not so good. I have safety divers. You can see me up there, and these safety divers are there to keep me safe, and you'll see that they help me a lot. Next thing you'll notice is I'm starting to turn here, and I'm not controlling that turn. I'm trying to stop that turn and failing. I'm actually making it worse. Now you see him stop me right there. Here's where I try to pull my parachute using the ripcord, and you can see that arm going back and forth and not doing anything. You'll see me use my other arm now, try to pull. I have two handles on both sides. Neither of them are working. Now my friend Blickies is going to pull for me, which he does. Okay, the bad news was not over yet. The other thing that happened was there's a decompress knob that I'm supposed to decompress the suit, and it's back here, okay? The way I'm hanging from that harness, I can't reach that. Not good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reach up to grab the steering toggles. I can't reach them. They're this far out. I'm sitting up there staring at these things. But the worst possible thing that I can do is to actually get one of them undone, because then I'll go into a spin. So you're sitting there toying with this idea. So I'm playing with that. I'm going back to here. And I'm back in the days, I don't know, I learned to skydive back in 1974 when you had a round reserve. Anybody remember round parachutes? They used to be around. Well, that was my reserve at the time. And the joke was they're pointable. They're not steerable. You can point them in any direction, but you're going to go wherever the wind takes you. And that's what happened here. I landed a couple miles out. But the thing about this is, we made that test. We learned an enormous amount on that test. And it took us a year to redesign every system so that we could get through that. And one of the things we learned, we thought there was this thing called a drogue parachute, a small parachute. It's about this big. And we thought that parachute would cause us not to spin, because it certainly will keep you from being upside down, but we also thought it would keep us from spinning. So let me just show you real quickly. This is our test from 120,000 feet with a dummy using our new patented, brand new spin-resistant system. And you see the RPM thing right there. And so far on the release, it looks pretty good. There's the drogue system right there. But you see the RPM start to go up. 60, 70, 100. So now this system that we think is going to stop us from spinning is actually spinning at 180 RPM. And what makes it even worse is that if you were to go up to 135,000 feet, which is where we were planning on going, the spin rate would have been 400 RPM, okay? So now we have to do things totally differently. So what we did was we worked on a system that was spin resistant. And we did that by pushing lots of dummies, well, doing a lot of research and then pushing a lot of dummies out of airplanes. And we found one innovation that stopped the spin problem. And it was very simple, and I'll show you that in this. In the jump where the dummy was responded to 180 RPM, this is the drogue parachute right here. You can see it hiding in this bag, and it's connected to the airplane and comes back down there. But that was connected here, right at your butt right here. And we found after a lot of test jumps and a lot of research that if we move that from there to there, our spin problem goes away. Matter of fact, in a subsequent thing, we dropped the dummy from 120,000 feet and it spun at 22 RPM. And you also have this really nice thing that your head is up high. And humans actually don't mind being spun head high. at high rates. Skaters do that all the time, right? They go it up to 300 RPM, I think is the record. So we solved 2 problems with 1. So let's say this is my last airplane jump, and we'll show you how this one turned out, which was much better. We also have this innovation of rollerblades right there. A little easier to exit that way. So you'll see me purposefully going in one direction. You'll see me purposely turn around and go the other direction. That bobbling, by the way, is a side effect of our spin resistance system. I could tell you more about that later, but so this was the airplane jump from about 18,000 feet. And that's it. But the fun wasn't over. The fun was over for me there, but my safety divers were still having fun. That's over Roswell, New Mexico. Okay, so now we have a system which we've designed and redesigned to make it possible for you to do, scuba diving in the stratosphere. We still need to get up in the air and try to test it at altitude, and planes don't go that high. So here's the system that we use. We used a balloon. These balloons are made out of polyethylene. They're thinner than a baggie. In this case, in a plastic bag. This is a helium truck back here. This is not the record balloon. This is the balloon that we use. But the interesting thing is capsules. Remember, we started with these capsules. And one of the problems with capsules is they're super heavy. Like the Red Bull capsule weighed 3,200 pounds. And so because they're very heavy, you need a very complex system to launch them. So the balloon that I used went a lot higher than Red Bull, but it was actually a lot smaller than Red Bull because the amount that it needed to lift was a lot smaller. And you can see this part right here is uninflated. As you go up, the inside will expand because the pressure outside goes down. And eventually this will become one giant round balloon. But you'll watch here really nicely. You'll see this is called a roller, and you'll see it roll up. And then here, you'll see 2 straps that basically hold this thing down. And I'm not connected to it because balloons are dangerous when you're connected to them because gusts of wind and things like that could drag you around potentially and things. But the trick here is, how do you get a balloon that's set up perfectly that you can tell exactly how much free lift it has without anybody being connected to it? And so you'll see right here that they take the roller, they open it up, and this thing drives off. And at that moment, this balloon is perfectly stable. These load tapes are telling me exactly how much free lift that balloon has. And at the moment where we think everything is perfect, that's the time that I'm going to get connected to that balloon. And you'll see that here. See, here's somebody actually telling how much wind is involved. That's the edge of the balloon. That's Julian Knott, my camera guy, my balloon guy. And then you'll see me entering stage right here. And so this thing that, by the way, they called that the launch sedan. But here's the point. This thing is going to come under that balloon, and I'm not connected to it. And then literally in about 10 seconds, there's one electrical connection and there's one mechanical connection. And then I'm back in free fall. So it was a really amazing way to launch the balloon. So with that, I'm going to go back and take you to Roswell, New Mexico. This is the record attempt, and we'll take you through the whole process of setting a record for the highest stratospheric free fall. So you see our helium truck there. It's the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning. I start pre-breathing oxygen, hours before I actually go. Then they put the suit on. It takes about an hour and a half to put the suit on. That's them taking me out to the pad. You know, the astronauts get these beautiful air-conditioned vans, and I'm kind of hanging there. This is the record balloon. You can see how much taller it is. That's my friend Dave Jordan. He's working with the FAA to clear airspace. So I have a 10-mile corridor all the way up, which has been reserved by the FAA for me, and all the jets are moving in the other direction. So that's the launch here. You can see me waving with the left hand. My first jump, I waved with the right hand, but my team banned that because the emergency cutaway handle is right here. Not allowed to use the right hand. That has to stay by your side. You can only wave with the left. And this began a 2-hour and 7-minute journey up there. It's the most beautiful, relaxing trip you can possibly imagine. Well, maybe you can imagine. It's quiet. You'll give me that, right? Anyway, so you're going up. While I'm going up, I'm mostly just practicing my emergency and normal procedures. I'm just thinking about what I do. If I start to turn to the left, what do I do? If I start turning right, what do I do? If the parachute doesn't open, what do I do? But other than that, it's a very, very relaxing trip up. This is mission control here. This is a second thing for kind of friends and family. A couple of my sisters are here. Part of the team is there that are not in mission control. And you can start to see what it's like to be up in the stratosphere. I mean, it's an amazing place. Absolutely, totally gorgeous. The curve here is a little more than the curvature of the Earth, but you can actually see it. This is a little bit of a lens effect, but you can see, easily the darkness of space and the curvature of the Earth. You can see the, you start out, you're looking at little pebbles underneath you, and, when you get up, you're looking at whole states. This is a great picture of what it looked like there. Although it doesn't do it justice, the atmosphere here has these tiny, fragile layers in it that you can never pick up on a camera. So this is the countdown. I'm going to come back to this drop sequence in a second just because there's a piece of innovation which is really important that none of you will see in the fast motion view. So the free fall here is 4 minutes, 27 seconds. You'll see right here the balloon go by. You'll see the drogue parachute. You'll see it's not really doing anything. It's hanging beneath me. You'll see the balloon go by one more time. Remember I said it was going to be round when it got up to altitude, and you could see that. These are all the scared people down on the ground. This is at about 17 seconds I was stable face to earth, so the system we used for stabilization worked really well. And at around 35 seconds or so was when I broke the speed of sound. It's quiet. You do not hear anything. And it's not about breaking the speed of sound. There's just no air resistance. So you're falling, and you cannot tell how fast you're going. The fastest speed I got was about Mach 1.22, which is about 820 miles an hour. Here we fast forwarded. Now I'm about to pull the parachute. You can see it come out right there. We did a really cool thing is when I opened at 10,000 feet, another plane flew over and dropped my friend Blickies, my parachute guy, and he was my wingman on the way down. So he was actually, you'll see him land essentially right next to him. Actually, he landed before me. I landed right next to him. He was by my side in 12 seconds, which was incredible. This is a picture he took. This is the landing, or more appropriately, the crash. I love that view. That's him running over. That's my hand up saying everything's okay. That's the vegetation I've managed to collect. This is when the team finds out everything. It's called a green extraction, and they find out it was a green extraction. Okay, so I'll move past that. I want to come back to this moment here, which is the release. And the reason I want to come back to it is it shows a level of innovation which I think is super exciting, which is in 1959, Kittinger on his very first jump from a high-altitude balloon was sitting in this seat in this gondola, and he tried to stand up because it was time for him to make the jump. And he did it for the Air Force to try to save Air Force pilots. That was his point. And so he tries to get up, and he can't get up because the seat pack that he has is stopping him from standing up. And therefore, he's struggling to get out of this. And while he's doing it, he sets off a timer, and that timer is the amount of time it takes for that drogue parachute to come out. And so by setting it off early, he gets up, he gets out, he goes over and jumps, but the timer goes off in 5 seconds rather than 15. And that drogue parachute actually wraps around his neck. He goes into a spin, and that's the last thing he remembers until an automatic activation device, which, by the way, had just been invented for his jump, opened, and he woke up underneath the canopy. So the question is, how do you get a drogue parachute out early enough so it does any good, but not so late as it just destroys itself in the wind that's going by? And so let's watch how that happens. And you'll see right here, there's a spool that's about this big, and on it is a piece of carbon fiber. And the drogue is actually sewn to that carbon fiber tape. And as it comes out, what you'll see is it does something very special as it comes off that reel. So let's just watch that happen. So watch right here. This is the spool, and look what that spool is creating here. It's creating a pipe. That spool is coming off flat and immediately turns into a pipe. And that pipe is rigid. I mean, it's so rigid you and I couldn't bend it if we wanted to. So what that does is this pipe is about 10 feet long, okay? This drogue is about 8 feet long. So there's no way that this drogue can ever tangle with me. So it's a very elegant way to guarantee that a drogue parachute will never tangle with me. And the other really nice thing about it is that this drogue parachute, when it starts becoming effective, is going to flip me over with the aid of a 10-foot lever. And that combination turned out to be really important. I should have been I should have been in zero gravity for 29 seconds, and it turned out I was there for only 17. So anyway, with that, the suit now is in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. You could go see it there if you choose. Obviously, there was an amazing team that put this together in Roswell, and that's the whole thing about innovation, is it's not a singular event, it's a multiple event, and this team was really, really spectacular and super special to me. We just had our 3-year anniversary last week for it. But I want to close with one thing about innovation, and it's something Larry told me a long time ago, and he was answering a question about innovation, and the question was, what's your greatest fear? To Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, and I thought his answer was really great. He said he does not fear that he'll try something super hard and fail. He said that's not his greatest fear, which I think for most of us is our greatest fear, that we'll try something super hard and we'll fail at it. And he said, my greatest fear is that we'll succeed at something and no one will care. And so for me, I think that says a lot about the way you should look at problems. That his view is if you try something hard and you don't succeed, you will have learned a tremendous amount along the way. And we certainly did that on this project. But if you succeed at something and nobody cares, you haven't really done anything super important. And I think that's the lesson that I take with me every day, is how do you try something that matters, and how do you try to do something in a way where people will care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alan. It was really amazing. We're going to open up the floor to some questions. I'm sure a lot of you have some really great questions to ask Alan. We're going to have some mics going around. To get you warmed up, I might start with a question of my own. One thing I was thinking as you were talking about this, you obviously took a huge amount of risk. There was a lot of things that could have gone wrong in this process, and it's important when you're working towards a vision to think about how can you motivate your team, and how can you bring everyone, all your stakeholders along with you. You mentioned it very briefly in your chat, but you talked about you have a wife and 2 daughters. How did you bring that whole team together and get them to buy into the risk that you were taking on?
So it's funny because they weren't as excited about this stratospheric skydive as I was. And for obvious reasons. We had done a lot to mitigate risk. So we had run over 250 tests. I was actually convinced, I did not know of a risk that we hadn't mitigated. I was not worried about it, scared about it. But as I tried to explain all the technical reasons that these risks were mitigated, my family's eyes just kind of glazed over, because no matter, first, I'm an optimist. They know I'm an optimist, right? And so it was hard for them. But what my wife did was take a very practical approach. She had like 13 things she wanted me to do before I was allowed to take the jump. And they were meant to be hurdles that were so hard to get over that I might never make it to the jump. She made me, like do personal training, obviously a living will, or had to be done. But then she got more creative. Like her basic structure is, I don't want to clean up the mess that you make should something go wrong. So I had to write my own obituary. I had to get a friend of mine to basically be responsible if anything happened to me, to plan all the services, invite all the people, all this kind of stuff. And then the last thing there were other ones as well, but the last thing she did is, I want you to make a video individually for each of your 2 children that would explain why the risk was worth it to you. And that was kind of the hardest thing. But I'm an engineer, right? Okay, you want a video? I'll make a video. No big deal. And it was kind of, I don't know, the video wasn't that good, because of course if I knew anything it was going to go wrong, I would have said something. But anyway, the video has never been seen, thankfully. Other questions?
So we've got a couple of questions here.
Hi, my name is Paulo. I'm from Brazil. So my question is, how did you feel after you landed, after this big mission? Sometimes when you accomplish something so big, you hear from some people that there's like this feeling of emptiness. So how did you feel after the whole process?
Definitely not a feeling of emptiness. I mean, the big thing, the big moment was when the parachute opens. Okay? At that point, I'm not going to die, right? I got a parachute. It's over me. I mean, you see my landings, right? Every landing was like that. It's like I'm in an airbag, so things are going to go okay there. And my team, seeing my teammate actually jump out and open next to me and then fly by me, I mean, to me, it was like, it was a wonderful feeling. But I just really felt really great for the team. Honestly, I felt like all the problems that we had gone through, all the setbacks along the way, all the pushes we had made, and there were some setbacks. Even a week before this, we burned up a balloon, and one of the mechanisms to get the balloon down actually went off on the while it was on the tarmac, basically. So I just really felt great for the team, and the team felt really good. I mean, all of us were just so excited, and there's no way that the video can do justice to the how we felt as a group and as a team. And the enduring thing is not a record. Records will be broken. But that feeling that we had as a team, when they handed me this. It turns out there's a framed copy of something, this material that was used in the suit, which is super expensive. They had made a poster of that. And everybody had signed it, and I have it at my house. And when I look at that, and that presentation was just a tear-jerking presentation. So, for me, that's what it came down to. There's no feeling of emptiness. I would have done other things with it, because once I have the suit, I can do everything. But didn't really work out that way. My wife was going to divorce me. The suit was in the Smithsonian. Team went on to do other things. So, oh well.
Hi, that was a great talk. I want to ask something with respect to the educationalist perspective. If somebody is going to do this kind of thing, what should be the prerequisites?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about prerequisites, because you go back and try to understand some people ask me, well, what preparation was most important to me? And I had some things going for me here. I was a skydiver since I was 18, so I had a lot of skydiving experience. I'm a pilot, so I have a lot of flying experience. And I'm an engineer. Now, granted, that's computer science. I was a mechanical engineer, and I dropped out of that program to go into computer science. But I had some experience there. And then, obviously, I had a bunch of experience at Google with teams and things like that. And, what was more, of those 4 things, what was the most important? And I have to say that the thing that was most important is the team side. the Google side. Because building the right team for something is the most important skill. Getting the right people with the right experience to come together as a group and move something forward is more important than the fact that I was a skydiver. And in essence, this isn't a skydive, right? I mean, I'm falling, right? How hard can falling be? We designed it so you could do this jump if necessary, because that's the way we designed it. And the piloting, it was nice to understand aerodynamics and things like that. But in the end, the thing that mattered is could I find the right balloon person? Could I find the right weather guy? I mean, could we as a team, could I find the right development organization to be the general contractor, Paragon Space Development? Could I find the right person to lead that? And we as a team slowly put together the pieces of this and brought that together. So that was the special sauce. And I think it's something that you can think of too in your own things, is how do you build the best possible team?
I think we've got time for one last question here, this gentleman.
Thank you. Congratulations on your challenge. My question is, will you support and encourage your kids to follow these type of challenges in the future? And
Wow, that's a tough question. Well, first, my kids were interested in skydiving until I did this. Now they have no interest at all, it's interesting how generations will go. Some people follow in their footsteps of their parents, and then some people go a completely different way. And I think both of those are acceptable, right? I mean, you can't really choose one. I don't think they'll go in this direction. They like to fly. I have a plane that they fly, and they enjoy that. But it's not the same for them. They have different. Matter of fact, my oldest daughter wants to become an educator. That's what she wants to do more than anything else, and she works with kids all the time. On 3 times a week and also in the summers. And that's her passion. So for me, I don't know. I don't even care how my kids end up, deciding. I do hope that they will not be afraid to take risk in their life. I do hope that comes across. There's a story I told at the end of my TED Talk, which I think is really sums it up, is we were about 2 weeks after the jump. I'm riding in my car, and my daughter comes up with this idea, and I look at her and I say, that's impossible. And then, she looks at me and she goes, Dad, after what you just did, how can you sit there and call anything impossible? And I think about it for a few seconds, and she was right, obviously. And I said, okay, well, it's not impossible. It's just really, really hard. And then I thought about it for a few minutes more, and I said, it might not be impossible. It might not even be really, really hard. The truth is, I just don't know how to do it. And I feel like that's the lesson that I'd like my kids to take away, is I just don't know how to do it. And you might. And I hope you know the answer to making education, easier and more effective worldwide, because education and knowledge is the one thing I think that can truly change the world. And I want to, I'll end with one funny story. Remember, Lorraine introduced me and said my title while at Google was the Senior Vice President of Knowledge. Okay, and there's a long story that goes with how that got to be my title. It was one of Larry's creations and very effective. But I said to myself, I don't know where to go from here. And I said, if I'm really, really, really effective, maybe my next title will be Senior Vice President of Wisdom. Thank you.